Thanks for joining us. The Finance Minister has spoken and we'll try and understand reactions from different stakeholders. Joining us now is Nalin Kohli from the BJP. Mr. Kohli, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me begin this conversation by asking you about the fact that the budget deficits have been met at the headline level by this budget. Several structural changes have also been taken into account. To your mind, from a political standpoint, does this budget appeal to all stakeholders?
A budget performs several tasks. It's an account, a statement of account of what's happened and how the year has been and how it's the path of the government in terms of what it intends to do in the immediate, which is over the next 1 year, in the short term over the next 2 or 3 years, and of course transformational in a longer period of time. And I think from that perspective, this budget is very, very clearly meeting all those objectives. In the short term, it is talking about a report card of how the government has functioned under Prime Minister Modi since he took charge in 2014. It talks about the fiscal deficit targets being met. That by itself is very, very important and impressive, because we had a situation a few years ago, about 6-7 years ago, when the fiscal deficit gap was a yawning gap and it was reaching levels of criticality, critical levels. Now, in that sense, it's under control, despite the government actually spending even more in terms of reaching out and improving the lives of millions of people, whether it's healthcare, which is Ayushman Bharat with a target of 50 crore people, lakhs of beneficiaries, millions of them actually, whether it's Ujjwala, where 7-8 crore people have got this benefit of gas connections, whether it's making the country open defecation free. Now you have a 99% coverage in the country. So a lot of work has been done, and I think from that perspective, it also charts out the future. So as the Prime Minister says, it's development oriented, it's pro-poor, it's middle class poor, it's middle class for the middle class. Infrastructure boost, looking at more than 1 lakh crores being pumped into that. Looking at startups and boosting it, looking at mega industrialization in terms of Make in India, in Sunrise and other important sectors.
Sure.
Clean energy, a big boost towards electric cars, and that's a leapfrog from one level of public transport and private transport to the next level,
sure,
giving those kind of benefits. So I think it's a budget that really meets and sets out the tone over the immediate, over the midterm and the long term.
Mr. Kohli, the economic survey harped on private sector investment as an important driver for growth. Do you think this budget has enough in it to create an environment for private sector to start investing?
Well, there are opportunities, if I can just at the top of a drop of my hat kind of say that you would note in terms of railways, it's going to be a private sector, public sector model, because 50 lakh crores is required, and that kind of funds the government alone can't have. There's a higher target and a good target of disinvestment. So that, of course, is something that is being offloaded to the private sector in Sunrise Industries and startup. In that sense, that's involving the private sector to take it to the next level. So certainly, I think as the details comes out and as the fine print is read by people, by and large, they'll realize that there is a lot here. It's also to boost consumption. It's in terms of the bank, or loans, to reach out for consumer sentiment, whether it's for cars or whether it's for housing, when that benefit of tax rebate in terms of houses up to 45 lakhs is being extended. So yes, this involves all the private sector, there's no question about it. Some of it directly and some of it is intended to as a result of the budget proposals.
One area where the budget is not extremely vocal is in the area of job creation. What is the thinking behind this, from a government standpoint, where areas like construction or tourism could have been easily attacked in terms of creating jobs? I mean, which is an absolute need of the hour, isn't it?
I think today the need of the hour is to distinguish between job creation and employment generation. Because jobs have a certain limitation in terms of how we qualify what is a job. It's mostly in the formal sector. It's government jobs, which of course should be declining, shouldn't be increasing, because Prime Minister Modi's agenda has been minimum government, maximum governance, and that's how it's been over the last 5 years. But employment is getting generated, and we've used this argument multiple times. If you take the case of, say, transport aggregators like Uber and Ola, industry estimates are 2 to 3 million jobs have been created in terms of employment. Now, these are self-employed people. If the Mudra loans you look at, that's almost about 17 crore people took it. 4.5 lakh crores. Now, these are people who are not going to be taking jobs, but they're certainly gainfully employed in their own initiatives, and perhaps also offering employment to others, which will not be counted as jobs. CII did a very large survey of almost 105,000 MSMEs, small and medium sector enterprises, and their estimate was, and that's a fairly good sample size, that between 13.6 and 15.2 million jobs were created every year, or I prefer the word employment generation took place. So I think if you look at this particular budget, you mentioned tourism, 17 world-class tourist centers to be created to boost tourism. Now that's creating an eco-structure and an ecosystem for tourism. And Prime Minister Modi has often spoken about tourism. He's been speaking about it for several decades as the Chief Minister of Gujarat and now as the Prime Minister, that the potential to transform through tourism, that's certainly going to open up a lot of employment opportunities. So I think it's all there. It's not as if this government is tightening or killing the job market. On the contrary, if we have already become from a 1.87 trillion to a 2.7 trillion economy. And when we are heading to 3 trillion, which is the immediate target, and 5 trillion over 5 years, is it possible to even imagine us reaching there without employment generation and jobs? It's an impossibility.
This budget has also levied a surcharge on the super rich. What is the thinking here, and how does this play into the BJP's political narrative?
We need to first preface that question with the comment of the Honorable Finance Minister when she said that we thank honest taxpayers because direct tax collection has really expanded in terms of those who are filing returns, those who are paying income tax. In fact, it's gone up by 78% from approximately 6.5 lakh crores to almost 12 lakh crores.
Sure.
That's a huge jump, and that's the honest taxpayer contributing to nation building. It's being recognized. And in that sense, when you're looking at simplification of the process, removing the human interface in terms of the online filing of returns, making scrutiny even less. Now 99.3% of people don't require to go through scrutiny. It's just down to 0.6 or 7%. That also, the human interface is going to make it unknown. There will be no possibility of knowing whose scrutiny is taking place because of the PAN card being, I believe, will be in terms of blackening it out or something like this. During the elections, we used to discuss about these possibilities. So yes, and in that, in terms of the super rich or the high net income people, it's a surcharge which is over and above income tax. Actually, the tax proposals have remained static. This is a surcharge on the net tax paid amount, and it's a fairly small cost to the final tax thing. It's not like a 3% or a 5% overall income tax effect. It's a 3% or a 7% surcharge on the net tax that you pay. So I think that they would certainly pay willingly, because in return the government is expanding infrastructure development, is making the economy more futuristic, and I think everyone's stake is in that, and particularly of this segment of society.
Mr. Kohli, we leave it there. Many thanks indeed for joining us with your perspective. That's the voice of the BJP. If you have been, thank you so much for watching.